first, let's get to the bottom of what happened with the AAF on Tuesday and that decision to suspend all operations. We welcome Ben Kercheval, who is in Austin, Texas, covers the AAF and college football for CBS Sports. And Ben, I'll just start with the top of mind why question. Why did the AAF and Dundon make the decision to suspend operations now?
So that's no pun intended, but that's the $1 million question, right? Because Tom Dundon stands to lose $70 million at least. I mean, I've heard that number is upwards of $100 million just by choosing to fold this thing right away without seeing it through. And there's the public comments and I guess sort of the ensuing perception of the fact that the AAF, which had been in negotiations with the NFLPA over the use of practice squad players, bringing them down to the alliance, getting them reps, and then sort of moving them back up to the NFL, that was a major sticking point. And there's an element of truth to that in the sense that, you know, there's so much red tape with the NFL, right, that you have to navigate through the collective bargaining agreement. You have to navigate through insurance claims if players get injured, futures contracts. I mean, all of those things have to be taken into consideration because there's so much red tape in the NFL. Mm-hmm. I mean, that takes years. The AAF has always said this is a 3-year project. With that materialization was already in mind before Tom Dundon even came on board with this capital investment in February. So there were Dundon's comments publicly about trying to move that along and the idea that he wanted 3 years of negotiating to take place over the course of 3 weeks. But you know, I think privately with the people that I spoke to, you know, I asked straight up, I'm like, well, if he's trying to use a sense of leverage that I think everyone generally agrees isn't there, then, you know, why is he going through on this now? If everyone's kind of calling his bluff, how come he's actually going through and folding the league? And literally every single person that I spoke to, I mean, this is not hyperbole, every single one said they didn't know. I mean, that is how completely in the dark and how blindsided everyone was by all of this. Because as the control owner of the AAF, I mean, people like Charlie Eversole, who's the CEO, Bill Polian, who's the head of football, who was really spearheading the negotiations with D. Smith and the NFLPA. I mean, those guys are working for him, right? I mean, he has resources available to him for consultation that he just straight up wasn't using. So, you know, there's the great question of why. Why would he choose to do this, eat the $70 million, and go through with this? It almost seems so ridiculous that there would have to be an ulterior motive to it. I don't know that I can give credence to any of that because it would be conjecture on my part. I can just tell you that the way that this went down was absolutely stunning. I went to a game on Sunday to work it. The people that I spoke with there indicated that it was business as usual. Mm-hmm. Teams were making hotel arrangements for the next few weeks to have, you know, team practices. Everything that they had been doing for the previous couple of months, they were continuing to do. And then literally 24 hours later, all of that changed, and calls from the NFL, the AAF, their investment partners. I mean, everybody from a high-ranking, you know, on up. I mean, everybody was involved trying to get this thing under control. And I can tell you, as far as the NFL's involvement in this, I mean, this goes all the way up to Goodell. And everybody seemed to be on the same page except Tom Dundon.
I understand he made a massive financial investment, but why did Eversole and Polian give him total control?
That's another great question, and I think when we look back on this with hindsight, that will be one of the key mistakes in this thing really crashing on down. Because if you go back to February when all of this really began, you know, Tom Dundon's capital investment, his infusion of cash into the AAF was viewed and kind of narrated as this, he's a savior, right? That they were financially in dire straits, unable to make payroll, all these things. And some of that was a little overblown. I mean, they had cash in the bank. You know, they would never really disclose how much that was, how much longer they could continue to go. The way that they phrase it, and this makes some semblance of sense, is that as a startup company, you're relying on capital investment. right? I mean, that's what you need to get from one milestone to the next until your valuation goes up. Maybe at some point down the future, you're partnered with the NFL. So you need just to get from point A to point B to point C. And at the time, Dundon's investment was the best of the offers that they had on the table, so they went with that one. And they felt like that got them comfortably the 3 to 4 years they needed to really make this project work and get it off the ground. But why they would yield so much control to Dundon, I mean, they named him the chair of the board of directors. Mm-hmm. Well, Amy, he was the board. He was the only person really making decisions in all this. So, you have Charlie, who's a really smart guy. You have Bill Polian, who has years and years and years of experience. You're talking about two incredibly bright, invested people who know this thing inside and out, who are giving control to an outsider. He's the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes. And, that's something that, I've asked a lot to people in and around the AAF. And again, it's how would you relinquish that type of control? And there's never been a super clear answer, but I will tell you this. When Tom came aboard, there was almost instant regret about letting him come in and do this thing. I mean, just from the week or two into this whole project, they were like, oh, this was a mistake.
Ben Kercheval covers the AAF and college football for CBS Sports and is with us after hours with Amy Lawrence on CBS Sports Radio. What are the chances or the prospects for restarting the league without Tom Dundon?
Not great. I mean, he was so you have to consider, first of all, that as the control owner, I mean, it's technically still, he's the owner, but it's not like his company. Charlie is still the CEO. This is when he became the owner of it. Yes, he has control, but it wasn't like a traditional sale. Right? He didn't just buy the company from Charlie. There wasn't an acquisition in that sense. So that's what complicates things and makes things a little bit messy, I think, moving forward as we dive through the fallout of all of this. But right now, Tom has the control to do pretty much whatever he wants, which is why all of this is happening in the first place. But with that, it's not like you can just easily do a buyout without all parties agreeing to this and then trying to find another source of income on all of this. And moreover, just given the bad press over the past, you could call it a week, but, there was a guy who wanted to sue Eversol, last month because he said this was his idea. I mean, it's sort of been one series of bad press after the next. And I think trying to find someone to come in and now, I think, genuinely, truly be the savior of this is much, much harder. And, I've had people ask me, like, well, would Jerry Jones, who's been a very public supporter of the AAF, like, would he come in and do this? I think what people need to realize is the influential people in the NFL, they like the AAF. I don't get the impression they're in love with the AAF. And that's not to say they couldn't get there, but I think like any product that's new to market, a lot of, you have early adopters, right? You have people who invest cash into it right away, and they get in on the ground floor. But then for the most part, you have people who kind of wait and see how it works out before they're ready to get on that train. And I think that's what you're seeing with the NFL. So I don't know, even though they're working very closely together, I have not gotten any indication yet that would be a lifeline of this. The way that this whole thing has gone, I don't know that I would ever say never in terms of this thing being saved. It's just that if it's not a 0% chance, man, it's real close.
What happens to the employees, to the players now?
Yeah, this is kind of the saddest part is, we can talk the macro vision of all of this, what went wrong, why did it go wrong, who's to blame for all of this. But, as you know, when these things come down the pike, it's usually the lower level people who get screwed, right? And, Charlie Eversol certainly has a lot on weight on his shoulders that I know he's thinking about right now. But, he's going to go and he's going to pick up and he's going to do another venture if this doesn't work out. Bill Polian is going to be fine. Tom Dundon is still going to be a millionaire. So those people at the end of the day are going to be okay, other than maybe what's on their conscience. Well, for the players, they got they're getting their last paycheck. They got fired today. And I haven't been able to confirm the reports that some of them had to take their, buy their own flights back. But it wouldn't surprise me if things just were cut off. An NFL, or not an NFL, an AAF ops person told me today, tomorrow's our last day. That's it. It's
Wow.
like it's over. So, there are media relations people, there are trainers, there are assistant coaches, there are people, so many people behind the scenes, PR people, social media people, fan relations, there are thousands of employees. There's over 1,000 people involved in this project. And involving yourself in a startup is always risky. I mean, of any size, it's always risky. And now those people are done. And, talking to them throughout the day, people are, it sounds like their voice is shaking. It sounds like they've been crying. I mean, it's just, these are people's lives.
Right.
And that's, I've heard so many things say like, well, the XFL might try to take some of this, or this was the XFL's doing, or the AF might try to beat it. And I'm like, y'all are missing the point. I mean, people have jobs here, and they're losing them. I mean, can we take at least a day and just give them a little bit of thought on all of this? Because they are good, hardworking people, and now it's done.
Ben Kercheval of CBS Sports with us after hours here on CBS Sports Radio. And I know this is a difficult question to ask since we don't actually know why Tom Dundon made this decision, but in your opinion, would the involvement of the NFL, would the NFLPA giving him what he wanted would that make a difference?
Great question, and we'll probably never know that for sure. Again, I'd like to think so, but if what he said publicly didn't seem to match up with what he was doing and what people thought privately, I don't know that would have been the saving grace for the AAF. And that gets us back to the point of, well, then what was the whole reason for forming the league? And really the other question is, what was the reason for him even being involved in the league? And again,
Right.
People have their own theories about that. Was he trying to come in and grab technology from the app that they had that would have been very useful for gambling purposes, spreads, lines, Vegas, slants, fantasy, things like that? And what I can tell you is, if that intellectual property is, unless they wrote it into his agreement that he would have first right to refusal for those types of assets, and I don't have the indication that was how that all went down. That stuff is ironclad. I mean, that is ironclad. That is their intellectual property. And if he tried to go after that, they would sue the hell out of him. So, I mean, there's a lot at stake for Tom to try to go in there and do something that risky. So I don't know that I can give credence to that, but at this point, and again, we're not even 24 hours into all of this. So there's so much more, I think, of this story that has to be told, and a lot of it's going to come out. And if I had to guess, it's going to make some people look bad, as usually is what happens when there's a massive failure, on this type of scale. But it's all still unfolding. So until then, you're going to have a lot of questions, and a lot of very good merited questions, and really not a lot of answers. I asked a lot of them today. Didn't get a lot back in return on some of those big important ones.
So, Ben, what you know of the league, though, if there had been no Tom Dundon and his infusion of money, could the league have survived financially?
That's what they say. I asked them, if you did not get, because at the time I said, if you had not gotten the $250 million, would you have been able to make payroll, say, 2 weeks from now, right, a month from now? Was that something that you were concerned about? And it was sort of redirected to the fact that it was a moot point because they were $250 million richer than they were a day before.
Right.
So how much cash did they have in the bank in January? That was never something that was disclosed to me. And, look, I've talked to some people pretty close to the situation, but even they wouldn't disclose that. And now so I don't know how financially viable they were. They had always made it pretty clear that, again, the materialization of the AA was the same before Tom Dundon arrived, and it was the same after he arrived. The difference was his infusion of cash into the program to make it run, to make the machine run. So they believed they were stable. Obviously now I think people would say that's a load of horse crap, but that was their belief. Even the conversations that I had today with people, that was what they had maintained. So that's probably going to be one of those things that, maybe it goes to the grave, right?
So it sounds like there could be more details that will come out eventually. So we'll have to keep in touch with you, Ben. You can find Ben on Twitter at Ben Kercheval, which is Kercheval. And he's one of us covering college football and AAF for CBS Sports. Man, your Twitter was blowing up on Tuesday, and we appreciate a couple of minutes, Ben. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
It's a lot of unanswered questions, as you can hear with Ben, who has been in touch with Mr. Polian and has been in touch with Charlie Ebersol, and still they don't know why. They don't know why. That's the big question that may never have an answer. Was there an ulterior motive for Tom Dundon? Is this him calling the bluff of the NFLPA and saying, you know what, you're not going to help out? Well, then I'm just going to shut all this down, and who cares about the 1,000 people who are out of work? And we may get more details and we may not, because that's what happened when they seceded all control to Tom Dundon. To me, it's the decision that was the beginning of the end. Why was one man given total control over everything that you built? Why would you do that? Unless, of course, you were desperate for the cash. However, according to Ben and according to Bill Polian, they could have survived without it. I mean, that's a damn difficult business decision to make, and it blew up in their faces. All right, you can find me on Twitter, A-Law Radio, if you have a reaction to the AAF folding. I know there are a lot of you who watched and who enjoyed it. I mean, you sent me texts. You sent me tweets and messages about Johnny Manziel and his debut and what you liked about the league. So you can find us on Twitter or Facebook, and our phone number is 855-212-4227. It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence, CBS Sports Radio. CBS Sports Radio.